Hello and welcome to Your Property Empire. I'm Chris Gray. According to research recently released by CoreLogic, property ownership is concentrated amongst couples, those who work full-time, high salary earners, baby boomers and families with small children. So what chance do millennials have of entering the market, and do you really want the children staying at home until they're 30 years old? Is this housing affordability issue down to stamp duty, foreign buyers, difficulty in raising a deposit or certainty of employment? Well, joining me tonight to comment on our stories is Kylie Davis, Head of Real Estate Marketing at CoreLogic. So I guess the first questions are these millennials, which I can't even pronounce it, just whinging that they can't get into the market?
No, they're not whinging, as much as we'd all like to think they are. But it's true that housing is definitely more unaffordable than it used to be sort of 15 years ago, and certainly even before that. So it's now taking people about 1.3 years to save up just for the deposit of a home, and that's their whole salary for the year, of household salary for a year and a bit, and that compares to about a year 15 years ago.
I was going to say 1.3, that doesn't sound like much. But
no, that's if you don't have anything at all. That's your entire household salary. That's assuming you've got super wealthy parents and no tax and stuff
like that.
Yeah, that's not just your savings.
So I guess for a lot of them, I mean, our parents always try to buy that big family house. Do they have to say, well, I'm not going to buy a house, I've got to get used to living in a unit?
Well, even units have gone up considerably. So, it takes now about 6.6 years to pay off a house in full, and again, that's your entire salary over time. That's the affordability level, and that compares to about four times. But even if you're trying to buy a unit, they're still extraordinarily much more expensive than they were 15 years ago. I mean, we all know that. I mean, look at the property prices in Sydney. You can't, you might be able to buy like a 2-bedroom unit in Sydney, but if it's close in the inner city area where people were sort of choosing to live as young funksters, 15 years ago, those units are way out of affordability.
Now, we've been talking about, I think this show's been going about 7 or 8 years or something like that, and some of the predecessors like John Edwards from Residex was always debating this, yeah. And a lot of the things they commented about is can we always quote these things of like income ratios? Because say our parents, they used to have massive houses, there's one income earner, they had high interest rates, now there's low interest rates. Can we still use those same ratios all the time, or do you have to kind of blend it in and there's a bit of a grey area?
No, I think you can still use those ratios because we're working on household income. So, and I think that's kind of one of the hidden tricks of housing affordability is that sort of 20, 30, well, certainly 30 or 40 years ago, we were probably using one income as the household income, but now households are usually made up of 2 incomes. And that when that's happening, you're seeing sort of other stresses that are happening in society. So if both of you are going to work in order to pay off a house, then how do kids come into it, and daycare and school fees or school expenses? There's a lot more pressure on, I think, younger families than there have been in the past.
And I think this is where, when people read these media reports, they do need to look at the detail to see how it's been constructed. Because, say, coming from an accounting background, they say, well, tell us what your profit you want, and then we'll generate the accounts around that. Yeah. So again, if there was developers or there's overseas people or share market people who are always going to generally back the property market, they could use single incomes rather than household income. Yeah. So you've got to be able to try and read between the lines to see who's actually constructing it as well. Yeah,
and I think there's a myth too that, if millennials would just stop eating smashed avocado, they'd all be able to afford a property. But I think we know now that the data certainly doesn't back that up at all.
And so I guess a complaint about young people these days is that, yeah, they want those breakfasts, they want to live in the best suburbs straight away when they're 20, they want to travel overseas, they want the latest iPhones. Do they need to change somewhat?
I think we all aspire to a better quality of life. I think we can see from the data that young people are, that the data is really against them, that you can't afford to buy a unit or a house unless you're going to move a long way out of town. We also see too that the units that are available that are more affordable are really designed towards investors. So we're seeing millennials are really keen on property ownership. 95% of them want to buy a property, but 62% of them are still living at home because they feel that they can't afford to move out and away from their parents.
And I guess that's where the rent vesting concept concepts coming in a bit more now.
Yeah.
That there are, I guess you're not seen as, I guess, kind of low life and low income and poor just by renting. There's nothing wrong with staying at home with your parents, still buying somewhere and then moving in maybe a few years later.
Yeah, and I think too we're seeing people, younger people are buying in suburbs where they might not necessarily want to live, but at least it's that first step on the ladder to get them started.
And so what are millennials saying about the main reasons for preventing them coming in? Are they blaming the older generation? Or
well, they should. Because they're the ones that have copped the capital gains. But although the downside to that is that they're staying at home with parents, so the capital gains, kids at home, you know, there's a balance there. But what they're saying is that for millennials, the biggest issues are saving for the deposit, which is a really big issue, and then making sure that you've got the money to pay off the mortgage. And we know that interest rates are quite low at the moment, sort of historically, so that worry about if they do go up a little bit, would I still be able to afford anything to get us started? Yeah.
So with all this research you've been doing, have you managed to find the magic pill? What is the options for millennials?
Well, so I think there's lots of options for millennials: staying home and living with the folks until you can get that magic deposit together. We know that increasingly that's a very popular option. About a quarter of the market, a quarter of millennials are staying into their early 30s, towards 30, before they move out, and buying properties in outer areas or investment properties just to start, or even in rural areas. And then the last one is that cubby house syndrome that we're seeing, where parents are actually renovating their established family homes so that you can have independent children in their 20s and possibly early 30s.
So putting them out in a granny flat rather than
you don't have to put the granny in the granny flat. You might actually turn the rumpus room into, or the home office into, like an independent apartment.
And actually, I heard a couple of years ago, one client actually moved out of their own home and actually went overseas and just left the kids in there because they thought it was
too hard to get rid of them.
Which is, I'm not sure if the house was in the same condition afterwards. But I guess for a lot of people, it's starting with the basics of even doing basic budgeting. And the great thing these days that we didn't have, say, 10 or 20 years ago is the education.
Absolutely.
The shows, the magazines, all the stuff online. There is so much information. People almost haven't got an excuse that they don't know what to do these days.
No, and I think the education too is another interesting point on this topic, because unlike my generation and probably younger or older, our kids are going into the property market with a $30,000 to $45,000 or $50,000 debt for their uni fees that they're carrying as well. So they do have a lot more exposure to long-term debt than older generations did.
Well, now it's time to jump to Charles Tarbey, and I know Charles has got both of his kids early on the property ladder. Are you with us, Charles?
Yes, I certainly am, Chris.
Good to see you there. And any comments on this stuff for the millennials? Any way to get them out earning quicker?
No, I think there's a set program in place, pretty much a set program for when I was younger. It's just shifted 10 years ahead. So I think it'll be people in the 30s and 40s that'll be experiencing what the 20s and 30s are experiencing right now.
Good stuff. Well, let's jump into the auction clearance rates.
Yeah, they've been really fantastic, bucking all the trends again. Even though people had thought that the process had changed, even though there's not as many buyers or the reserve prices aren't being smashed in the same way, the clearance rates hit 72.4% nationally. This time last year it was 71.6%, so still an improvement on last year and still very, very strong. The Sydney market itself came in at 72.9. That was followed by Melbourne, and Melbourne didn't do too badly at all at 72.4, but the best performing capital city actually happened to be Adelaide at 75%. Even Canberra was in the 70s. So overall it was a very, very strong auction clearance market.
Now, I've just flown in from overseas this morning, and I know a team meeting this morning, everyone says pretty much all the Australians are overseas. Has it made a difference suddenly when you have 2 weeks of school holidays and everyone's trying to get warm?
Quite possibly, yes. I came back yesterday also from the US, so you must be jet lagged. I don't know where you came from, but I was certainly feeling it. Even though the school holidays were there, it was still a significant market. And Tom and I spoke a little earlier, and he's got a strong rap on what's been going on as well.
Well, I was teaching my 7-year-old kids how to save money by flying economy 24 hours to Europe, so hopefully they'll get on the property ladder. Okay. But let's jump to homes advertised for sale.
Look, there's not a lot happening there. It went positive last week, but it's come back negative again at 0.4%. I think people are starting to gear up for the end of August and September. campaigns that really start to get very strong in those periods. So I think we would see extra stock coming onto the marketplace over the next 2 or 3 weeks. It should start to amass into something a little bit more significant than what has been happening.
If that happens, I'll be a very happy man, Charles. Let's move on to residential rent price movements.
Again, nice steady movements all around the place. 0.47% increase this week over last week. But the worst performing capital city was Hobart this week, and it's been the best for some time, so it's not unusual for it to have a correction because it was moving very, very strongly. It came in at negative 1.08% as opposed to the climbs it has had, but most of the other capital cities were pretty steady. We've had an increase of 2.64% in rent movement since we started keeping these charts over a couple of years ago. Not significant, Chris, but still a reasonable increase. Not keeping up with yields, of course.
Wonderful. And finally, the vacancy rates.
Yeah, Melbourne just blew me away. Melbourne came in at 0.92%. That's one of the best results we've seen in a long time. That was followed by Sydney at 1.22% vacancy rate. And Perth, it came in a little bit higher again at 9.42%. All in all, you've got an average of 3.85% over those capital cities. But again, Melbourne, wow, a lot of things pointing to Melbourne being the place to still look at buying.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for all those numbers, and those numbers care of Century 21 and also CoreLogic RP data as well. Thanks for joining us, Charles. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Chris.
Now, we're going to take a short break, but we'll be back soon. Welcome back to Your Property Empire. Well, joining me on the show tonight is Kylie Davis, Head of Real Estate Marketing at CoreLogic. So the question now is, Kylie, could robots actually replace real estate agents, God forbid?
Yeah, I think they could, Chris. I think they could certainly replace the bottom of the tier.
So, because I guess the main thing is they always have these surveys of what's the worst person. Is it I guess lawyers, car salespeople, real estate agents. So I guess there'll be a lot of happy people out there if they could actually replace that. Well,
I mean, I'm being a bit facetious. I think really good real estate agents are never going to be replaced by robots, but I think there's certainly tasks that robots can do that will make both the life of real estate agents easier and will also make consumers happier, because some of those automated tasks they'll be able to have taken care of without having to deal with someone who's they might feel is a bit annoying.
So what are examples of those kind of things?
So obtaining information about a property. So I think we're in a 24-hour society these days, and a lot of people are doing their homework for real estate later at night or even in the wee hours or on weekends and at awkward times. So being able to type in a query about a property and have an automatic response back is really important. I think too they're also being able to just ask questions and get an automatic response back. So we've all got a bot in our phones in the form of Siri, and seeing some of those, that technology of speaking and asking a question, whether you're in an open home or whether you're at a I don't know, anywhere that or even asking your phone for a question about real estate, being able to get that information back straight away.
So most of these bots then, rather than actually kind of physical robots, they're more technology like Siri or Google that can give you that information? Yeah,
they're called chatbots. And so Google has a new product coming out. It's in the US already, called Google Home. It's like a speaker, like a Sonos speaker. Amazon have another product called Alexa, and they're like speakers that sit in your home. And instead of, after a day at work where you've been sitting typing all day and looking into a screen and you don't want to be looking into your phone anymore, you can come home and you can ask your speaker to do things for you. So you can ask it to turn your music on, you can ask it what the weather's going to be tomorrow, you can ask it about your commute, your diary, you can ask it to look up things on Google. Lots of research-based tasks you can do with these new bots. And I think we'll see them starting to flow through into real estate pretty quickly.
Now, obviously, computers are all well and good when they're working, but what happens when it goes wrong? Because, again, I guess we've all been on hold for half an hour trying to get through to the phone companies or sometimes the TV companies. Is it always going to work for people?
Look, I think it's not going to always work, but I think most of our queries that we ask of human beings on the end of a phone are often very typical queries that are easily answered. And I know that real estate agents often have the complaint that, you know, this person just emailed me or sent me a text message or sent me a message through realestate.com to get a price, and actually that was there on the property all the time, and why didn't they read the ad properly? So, but a bot isn't going to care. A bot's just going to say, well, thank you for inquiring about 27 Smith Street, here's the price, you know, can I provide you with some more information, and then encourage you to get more information until such time as you hand over your email address and your phone number, so that it's a real lead for the agent.
So the bots are kind of guaranteed not to lose their temper and not to get sarcastic.
No, they're very placid. Yeah, they're very placid.
Now, obviously, for a lot of the young people, I guess that's an advantage. They probably are pretty happy not dealing with the other humans. Is it going to cater for the whole of the market, especially, I guess, the older generation?
I think every generation has a preference in how they like to deal with people based on their comfort around technology. I know, so baby boomers are more likely to want to speak to someone on the phone. Gen X, I'm a card-carrying Gen X member. I don't mind. I quite like texting. I think it's. I'm a journalist, so I like to write more. But my younger sons, they both say that phone conversations stress them, and so they just want to deal with people on the by text or by email if they're, you know, dealing with someone older. But messaging and having an instant answer on a bot, like you can see a lot of. Helplines online will now service you with a bot until you get to a point where they can't answer the queries anymore, so then they move you over to a human being. And no one's pretending that they're not a bot. They, you know, it's all pretty standard information that they provide.
Oh, look, it's certainly easier being on a chat line for half an hour rather than it is on the phone line, because at least you can probably do 3 or 4 things at the same time.
Yeah.
Now, what about the agents? Because, again, not all the agents are that young and into that technology. So what kind of agents are getting in, and what should they be doing to try and bring technology in?
Well, I think those agents that are really interested in providing a great customer service experience for their clients, because what the bots allow you to do is provide information to anyone at any time without having to deal with the stress of actually managing lots and lots of little tasks, or, you know, outsourcing stuff to your EA all the time. You can send reports through these sorts of bots, and so I think setting them up on your website, having the on your Facebook site or Facebook page, having the Facebook chatbot working for you. These are all really great ways to provide information to customers when they want it, not when you want to get back to them.
And maybe what are some of the things to consider for those businesses that are introducing this kind of technology? Are there some kind of pros and cons that you need to be aware of?
Yeah, I think you need to not pretend that it's a human being. You need to be really upfront and transparent around that it's a bot answering some basic questions, but it's there to get you to the next stage and to help you decide whether a property's, you know, something that you want to continue to inquire about, or whether actually you've now got enough information to dismiss it. They're great for providing information about open for inspections. They're great for providing information about what the price, maybe the price estimation is, or sending reports out telling you how the suburb has performed, all that kind of information that's available through data. But don't pretend that they're a human being, and have a really great system in place so that as soon as someone does need a high touch, that you've got a person to give them a call and love them up.
Now, it's probably a good opportunity to bring Tom Panos into the conversation, who's very much still about selling properties through newspapers, and obviously dealing with the real estate agents as being one of the real estate agents as well, and one of the auctioneers as well. Are you with us, Tom?
Yes, I am.
Good to see you. So do you think they'll all be completely replaced, or is there still a need for a human element, Tom?
No, I think, you know, what Kyle is talking about sounds to me like it is good for the consumer. It's actually good for the real estate agent as well, because where I think a real estate agent actually brings value is more in the negotiation process and in anything that's got to do with the human factor. So, Chris, I would actually say that it's going to be anything that is a win for consumer, and anything that can be delivered in a more efficient way means that it becomes a cost-effective method to connect a product or service with a client. So I think it's not something that real estate agents should be concerned about. They should embrace it. But one of the things I've learned, Chris, is sometimes the minute you get fancy, fancy gets broken.
Yeah. And Tom, I guess in a lot of sales seminars, it's all about being dollar cost productive. So agents are much better off spending their time negotiating the properties and trying to get the serious buyers in there rather than dealing with the 95% that are just asking silly things about the prices.
Absolutely, Chris. And I think that the best agents in the country, I find it incredible that a lot of them actually write down at the start of the week their listings that they've got on pen and paper, because there's something creative about writing down and focusing on what can you do that week to get that property sold by actually simply the fact of writing it down and being focused on it.
Now, another thing that's changing in the property market is the banks are getting tighter on the lending, which actually is an advantage for when you send your properties through, because you've sent another property through, which could definitely be appealing for me if I had an unlimited budget. But I'll leave you to tell the viewers about it, Tom.
Yes. So, do you want me to go on and talk to you about this
far
property?
away.
Okay, well, firstly I'm going to tell you that this property, Chris, is very unique because you can't actually live in it. It is not by law allowed for you to live in it. It can only be used for recreation purposes, and it is known as Boat Shed 8, Cornelian Way, Newtown, Tasmania. And let me just tell you a little bit about it. It was built in 1900s, early 1900s, and it's a charming boathouse complete with mooring and a sizable yacht. Sorry, doesn't include the yacht. It's for mooring a sizable yacht, and it's got great easy access to restaurants and also the cafe and Hobart CBD. The price of it is $245,000 to $275,000. It's presented by Sam Towns, and you can actually see that property on the patrusa.com.au/8boatshed, or if you just go onto realestate.com, I'm sure you'll be able to find it up there.
Yeah, certainly amazing property, Tom. And again, you've always got to read that fine print of the adverts to say, look, unfortunately, you can't live in there. It's the devil's in the detail always, isn't it, Tom?
You can go out and hang there in the day and then go home to your house to sleep.
Which will keep your wife or your husband very happy, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Now, obviously with Carly, we've been talking about robots, technology. You're very much up with all this stuff.
Yeah.
I know you've talked about Facebook and Instagram before, but can you tell us a bit more about how it really is changing things these days?
Yeah, well, you know, what's happening now is, Chris, I mean, a lot of people are using Facebook as the first website that they go to, or if they're on their mobile phone, which most people are when they're using social media. I mean, they get off a plane, the minute they can turn their mobile phone on, they go on a Facebook to see what's going on. It's the second most visited website in the world after Google. So what people are doing now is using Facebook as a way to stay in contact with what they want to, you know, be following information. And real estate agents now have cleverly found ways to actually connect with potential buyers. Sometimes they'll actually just import the database that they have into Facebook, and they can then actually hit people's timelines intelligently by saying to Facebook, I want this property to go to the people that I've given you their email or their mobile phone number, and Facebook can do that. The other thing is that real estate agents are increasingly using live stream, and I use it consistently. Nearly every week I will live stream a couple of auctions, and that way 20 or 30,000 people can actually watch the auction live. And not be at the property. So we're seeing more of that. The other thing, Chris, is I can target you on Facebook and as a buyer and say, I want people that are living in this area of Sydney at this age group, and I can actually hit your timeline. So that's what we're seeing the smart real estate agents are doing. In fact, I'm saying that Facebook is pretty much the letterbox drop of 2017.
Perfect, as always, Tom. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for Carly Davis as well from CoreLogic, and as always, Charles Tarbey from Century 21. Thanks for joining us at home. I'm going to be back next week. Until then, I'm Chris Gray. Good night.